first speaker is Mr. Ranoji M. Kochare, Application Engineer at HBK. We then have Mr. Ankit Adhya, Senior Manager, Electrification, ANSYS Software, and Mr. Tushar Sambaram, Principal Electrification Solution Specialist at ANSYS Software. And finally, we have Mr. Kushan Pawar, Head Cybersecurity Solutions, Mobility, ETAS, Automotive India. Before we start, please note that for all those who are watching, your microphones have been muted. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so please do send us your questions and we will do our best to get them answered. Don't also forget that we have a virtual exhibition with companies from the electric vehicle and tech space, so please do visit the virtual exhibitions as well. Once again, thank you for joining our E2W Summit today. And I would now like to invite Mr. Ramoji M. Kochare, Application Engineer, HBK, to begin his presentation.
So, hi everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so welcome everyone and good morning and welcome to today's topic, improving the durability and efficiency of electric vehicles with powerful analysis. So I am Ranoji Kochare and I am an application engineer in HBK. So these are number of sensors and data acquisition systems available in HBK. So we can measure the strains for electrical and optical way, and accelerometer and microphone to measure the torque. We are having the torque transducers. So to measure the temperature, we have a number of sensors, and to measure the current and voltage, we are having this type of sensors. So what domain do we concentrate on? So in mechanical, structural durability and reliability, structural dynamics with vibration and model. In electric part, we power performance, efficiency from loading to battery pack, from battery pack to street. And in thermal region, thermal durability, thermal management and supporting aggregates. Okay. So what can HBK offer in this field and what is our unique selling point is, so you can see the number of applications for noise and acoustics. So for structural integrity, we provide solution in static dynamics in environment and mobile for durability and RLDA. So here you can see for whole body analysis, whole vehicle, we can measure the number of data and we can do the further analysis. So for pass-by noise and in-cabin noise, we can measure the data. So here we can see the RLDA data we can acquire, pothole or pavement data, and here in right side corner you can see the shaker profile. So by using this number of sensor and data acquisition system, we can collect the data. So moving to the next slide. Okay. So we are taking the data to do the further analysis. For that we are using the HBK sensor and data acquisition system, and after that we are taking that input and we are giving that input to the encode. So Prensha is the software side of the HBK. So it is made of two really powerful piece of engineering software. First one is the encode and second is the ReliSoft. So encode is for the durability and processing measured data, and ReliSoft for the reliability analysis. Now we are going to focus on encode software brand only right now, so we can discuss the need of reliability analysis in electrification another time. So first question comes in our mind when we buy the electric vehicle. So there are two challenges in electric vehicles. So how can we reduce the risk of structural failure? And second is, how can we ensure the performance, range and efficiency expectation are we met or not? So we know all are moving to electric vehicles due to the petrol hikes. The average price in India is almost 105 rupees, and government is also giving tax concessions and some discounts on electric vehicles. But in India, no one believes easily, and no one is going to buy electric vehicles after watching reviews and videos only. So they simply believe in mouth publicity, means discussing with the existing customer, and in that first question comes in mind is kitna saal chalegi. Kitna saal chalegi means how many years it will last long, right? So is the battery tray is going to crack, or what if the electric vehicle started giving too much maintenance? So these things all comes under the durability. And second is the performance. So second thing is like kitna degi, means what will be the mileage. So is the two-wheeler range is as good as we promised, right? So suppose one can say our mileage is 150 km and I planned trip from Pune to Mumbai, but I stuck in between Lonavala due to the bad mileage and not promised mileage. So currently these two issues mainly having with the electric vehicle, and both durability and performance improvement is possible in Encode. So with the powerful analysis we can improve that. So how it's possible, we'll see. So first we'll focus on durability requirement. In that we'll cover the fatigue and failure mode, what is fatigue, and for that electric motor durability, and for that we'll see the one small demo. And next agenda we'll see the how to improve the motor efficiency and power measurement and its analysis, and demo for that. Now here is the journey. So from design to validation, you can see first we are designing that product, then developing, we are creating prototype, then we are qualifying that on shaker table, and then we are checking the service. Okay, so here the product development roadmap from design to development and to service. Today we are going to focus on the development piece. So how do we know it's going for how many years long last? So how do we know it performs as intended? So it's extremely expensive to watch prototypes fail in the test lab. So we don't want to commit time and cost building prototypes until we confident that our design will meet their requirements. So we need to able to predict the quantify performance early before the development cycle. So here we'll see the prediction of durability. So before going to the qualification and shaker table and in test lab, we can say, okay, this is the life and no need to go for the prototype if it is already failing, right? So how it's possible, we'll see. So we'll focus on durability now. So this is the fatigue. So fatigue is a failure mode. So that can happen over a time, and stress cycles cause cumulative damage that ultimately can lead to the structural failure and disappointed customer again. So we need to design again this, ensure our electric vehicle is durable and it will last long for time. So in automobile, 7 to 80% parts and fails due to the damage occurred by fatigue. In simple word, fatigue is a plus minus forces and acting on a part which creates a hotspot and localized area. So you can see image here. So battery part is fail here due to the fatigue. So when we are talking about the electric vehicles batteries, but finally it is a mechanical structure, right? So for that fatigue is very important, and fatigue calculation and life. So here you can see right side. This is the primary crack. Fatigue deals with the primary crack initiation and crack growth. So from here we can say, okay, this is crack is from formation started, and for that how many the cycles it will survive. So for that we are using the SN and EN curve. If we see here, suppose there is a stress, what is the coming from the FEM model. For that stress we can calculate the number of cycles here, and now suppose we are having the 2 lakh kilometer and we want to survive that vehicle for 2 lakh kilometer. For that cycle and for that life, we can reversely count what will be the stress value. So vice versa, we can calculate the damage and life for that a particular product. And to generate that curves, we are having the test lab, material testing lab in UK. There we can generate new curves also, SN curve, EN curve as per your requirement. And already we are having the number of variety of material database in Encode. So for calculation, we can use that. So now we'll see how to calculate the life of that product, right? So here is the 5-box trick. So fatigue analysis. Then here you can see this is the squiggly line. So suppose your electric vehicle is moving, means we are creating some forces on that vehicle, and that forces, that vibration we can measure. So this is the squiggly line, and this signal is measured by HBK device. And this is the loading, and this is the FEM model having stresses. So this is the geometry, and third is the material. By giving these 3 input parameters in Encode, we are calculating the fatigue life. So for this specific material, we having the strain and stress curves. Now we'll see how to calculate the fatigue. Now here is the small demo for that. So kitna saal, now if you see here, kitna saal chalegi means how many year it will last long. Now here is the battery tray holders are here. Now we have to check the damage and how many years it will last long. Now here is the battery and these are the supporting brackets. Now we'll see one small demo for that to calculate the life. Okay, so this is the user interface of the Encode. So left side, you can see this is the glyph work. It is useful for test data processing and design life to calculate the damage and life. And here you can see in working window, we can import the input files. Now I am dragging simply the OPT file. This is the FE file. So this is again a 5-box tricks. Here is the FE model with stresses. Here we are applying the loading and we are doing some calculation here and we are calculating the life here. So I am simply running this flow. And right side, you can see the number of glyphs. So glyph is an Egyptian word and each glyph is made to perform a specific operation and specific task. So by connecting this glyph one to another, and we can create one flow as per our requirement and we can calculate the life. Now run is completed. Now we'll see. Now here is the battery supporting bracket. Now I have done some changes in hours and in years. Now here you can see hotspot is coming. Now at this node, the battery is failing at this node. So here it's saying minimum value is 12.8 hours. So we can say that the battery tray will fail after 30 hours, right? So when we apply that much load. So from here we can design that, redesign that such that it will not fail. So we have to go with the shaker profile or test lab if the virtually product is already failing. So for that, we can save the money and time also, and we can redesign that. So for durability purpose, this is very useful. So this is on demo side. Now we'll move to the next slide. And this is for a depth review. Means depth details at what node, what will be the life, how many repeats it will survive. Now we'll move to the next slide. Now next topic is efficiency analysis. In that we'll see how to improve the motor efficiency and how to measure the power and their calculation. Okay. So from DC battery, we can measure the current and voltage, but the inverter plays a very important role here. And from that, we are converting using AC current and voltage to mechanical using the motor, and we are finally giving that to the wheel as a kinetic energy, right? So need to maximize the efficiency, but converting power types leads to inefficiency. So we can use a wide variety of motor control strategy, but which is the best efficiency? We need to do 3 things to answer this question. First one is the major power flow, that is DC current, voltage, and 3-phase AC output from the inverter, and finally mechanical speed and torque from the motor. And from that we can calculate the efficiency throughout to quantify the performance. So we can begin with the improvement in system for range and performance. So we'll see how it's possible. So for that, Encode electric glyphs is very useful. I will move to the next slide. Okay. So to measure that input currents and out electric current and voltage, we are using electric e-drive system here. So we are using HBK's e-drive system to measure the electrical power testing. So tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. you can see the Michel Mark presentation for these details for depth review. So here you can see batteries here. From there we can measure the DC current and voltage. In inverter we are measuring the 3-phase AC current and voltage, and here in from motor we can measure the torque and speed, and by using our HBK hardware we can acquire that data, and Encode sits here. So by taking that data we are measuring and we are doing the powerful analysis. So what is the efficiency for a specific inverter and motor, and accordingly we can improve that design. So for e-drive, it is very simple to record that with the 2 million samples per second, we can record the signal. This is the accuracy range, and simple data collection of electromechanical signal also possible. Okay. Now we'll see the efficiency of electric vehicle. How to calculate that? We simply know how to calculate the power by multiplying current and voltage. But here the inverter plays very important role. And here is the mechanical power. We can calculate that using the torque into speed, right? So DC power is easy to calculate. So the mechanical power, but AC power calculation can be hard because of the phase difference between the voltage and current that causes the losses. So inductor and capacitor introduce the phase lag or lead, and periodically energy flow is reversed. So need to think about the active and reactive power, and we'll see what is that active and reactive power. So active power is they introduce back in the system and cause losses, which is yes, losses. And reactive power is the useless power that only flows from source to load. So we can quantify that and understand all this using the HBK tool. For easy understanding, we'll see. Okay. For easy understanding, we'll see what is apparent active power and reactive power. Now this is the drink analogy. From here we can see this is the apparent power, or what is coming from the DC battery or battery, but we can consume this much only. So from this coffee we can consume active power this much only, and the rest is the foam. This is the reactive power. In simple word, we can say we can't increase the reactive active power. So when we want to increase the efficiency of battery, we can reduce the reactive power by measuring the input output from the inverter and motor, and we can calculate where our battery or motor efficiency sits. So by reducing the active power, we are increasing the active. By reducing the reactive power, we are increasing the active power here. So efficiency for the battery and motors. So for electric inverter, you can see here. Here is the simple sinusoidal waveform. This is the current and this is the voltage. You can see the squiggly line here. By multiplying the current and voltage of the inverter, we can create a power here. So the below the zero line, the negative value, this triangles is the reactive power. So in FFT, we can see the low frequency fundamental control frequency and high frequency switching harmonic from digital inverter. So our harmonics are much larger in voltage and current, and this high frequency makes more calculation difficult. But that can be taken care by the ENCODE by using the electric power analysis glyph. Now, if you see here, this is the active power, this is the mean of voltage and current, and apparent power is the RMS of the voltage and current. And reactive power is calculated by using this formula. This is the power factor. Now, if we assume the pure sine sinusoidal waveform for the voltage and current, apparent power is wrong because it's ignoring the broad frequency content. So actually, when we measure the data, we can't see the pure sinusoidal waveform. So then calculated reactive power is really high. So, but again, for that, we are using the electric power analysis glyph here. So we recently launched this, and in that we can find the performance and efficiency. Now, kitna degi means how many mileage one electric vehicle can give. So to improve the performance of inverter, we'll see the one small demo. Okay, so here is input data. Now here you can see we are having the 3 events. In that we have taken 3 input current channels, 3 voltage channels, and 2 output channels coming from the motor. So for to create a duty cycle, we have dragging 3 all events, and we are combining here. So you can see the signals here. Now to calculate the mechanical power, efficiency, power factor, we are using the electric power glyph here. Now I am running this flow. Now you can see here for this specific RPM and this specific torque, this is the efficiency. The yellow color you can see, this is the maximum efficiency. This data is blank because we have taken only 3 events. When we having the number of events or data is available for that, we can see the field graph here. So from here we can say, okay, So what is the old motor and what is the efficiency for that? Now we have done some changes in new motor, then the efficiency is good now. So for that we can create a number of strategies. Same like motor, we can calculate the efficiency of inverter also and efficiency of battery also. So for that we require simply the current and voltage. So this is for demo side.
Mr. Kochare, just to remind you, we're slightly over time. If you could wrap up quickly, please.
Yes, we'll 5 minutes. Yeah. Yes, this is the conclusion. So we have spoken today about the challenges in designing the electric vehicles. First is the will it be durable to last long for without a structural fail, and will meet the customer range and requirement. So Encon software can help you to both these requirement. So we have achieved the two targets. So kitna degi the performance and durability. So here is the last slide. So under the HPK, almost everything is possible. We are in this field almost more than 40 years. So over the period, we merged to give the better performance and quality solution. I'm not saying I am expert, but definitely we are. So the only question is remaining is you have to just come up with the question and answer will be there. And thank you. And here is my mail ID. For further details, you can drop me mail and to webinars and electric vehicle verification products. Here are some links and you can download for detailed brochure in booth also. So once again, thanks to Mobility Outlook for giving us a chance for presentation. And thank you once again all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kochare, for a very informative and insightful presentation, and also changing the question how we normally ask for IC engines, kitna deti hai. So seems to be different for the electric vehicle. Thank you for your time.
Yes. Yeah.
And do stay back. We'll have some Q&As at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can I request the Mobility Outlook team to start the next presentation from ANSYS, please?
Hi all to this session of virtualization and design and validation practices for accelerated EV design. So I'm Ankit, Senior Manager Application Engineering at ANSYS. With me, I have my colleague Tushar Sambaran, Principal Electrification Solution Specialist at ANSYS. So let me start today's session. So to set the stage, let me share some statistics with you. So in this particular slide, what I'm showing here is like, the EV growth, which we see in next coming decades. So if we look at the EV growth, here what we are seeing is like by 2030, we will see almost the growth of 20% EV compared to the existing one. And by 2040, if you look at China, it's almost surpassing 50%. And if you compare to that of India, it's lower, but it still will be having 30% EV growth. I agree with given the pandemic, automotive market was the one which was impacted heavily, but with the new normal coming up, we see the automotive market is coming back to its normal. And in that also the two-wheelers, because nowadays people are looking for a safe transportation. That's why two-wheelers market is growing rapidly. And in that, we see a good growth in EV market. So if we go with the guidelines of NITI Aayog, where they are expecting by 2025 to have all two-wheelers below 150 cc to be made EVs. And if we go with that guidelines and also with the three-wheelers where they say, okay, by 2023, or we should be switching to EVs. So if we go with that guidelines, by 2030, we'll be having almost 30 to 40% of two-wheelers, EV two-wheelers on the roads. So that's what we envision moving down the line. And if things are going well, that's the EV market which we see. So now the question comes is what are the bottlenecks? And there are a few of the bottlenecks. One is the initial cost. So if you look at the India market, the very first thing which comes to everyone's mind is the cost, the initial cost. So if you look at the EV, even for the two-wheelers, the EV two-wheeler cost is higher compared to its equivalent IC engine two-wheeler. And the reason for that is most of the EV components which we are looking for are imported. So I would say 60 to 70% of the components are imported, and unless and until we switch to indigenous component development, I don't see the cost coming down. So that's one of the bottleneck. The second bottleneck which we see is the infrastructure. And the third is a safety, which is something a major concern for, when you switch from IC engine to an EV. We all know the lithium-ion batteries are not stable, and it may, sometimes it may, due to thermal abuse or mechanical abuse, there may be fire, and which may result into explosion. So that's where you can OEMs are switching to virtual validations, in which they try to make sure they can come up with the indigenous component development, and also make sure the designs which they come up are more reliable and robust. In the next coming few slides, we'll be focusing on virtual validation and verification.
Hello.
Yeah. But before switching to that, let me take a minute and explain about ANSYS, ANSYS, the organization where we are from. So ANSYS was founded in 1970, and the initial focus was on mechanical solvers. But over the period of time, it has kept on emerging, developing its technology, not on the mechanical side, but also acquiring the best-in-class technology, be it Fluent, Ansoff, STRL, which were very well known for physics like fluids, electromagnetic, and so on. So physics-wise, and now also the latest acquisition is the AGI and Phoenix integration, which is bringing answers into a system-level engineering also. So that's the ANSYS journey, and along with that, making sure the customer are able to visualize their product, how virtually how it will perform in real life. We are also partnering with many of the OEMs like PTC, SAP, and so on. So ANSYS, I would say it's more of an engineering solution provider than just a point solution provider. And next few slides, let's talk about switching to EV. We all know in EV there are the pillars for EVs are the battery, the traction motors, the power electronics, and the system and software development. And in this, simulation has been used, I would say, more than a decade. ANSYS itself is a history of being in EV simulation field for more than a decade. I mean, I would say in early 2000 also, people were designing EV motors using ANSYS. Now, we'll be talking about this all building pillars, but the most interesting part which we wanted to highlight in this presentation is like the development, the V cycle, which is in the development V cycle, which we normally see it. And on the right hand side, once you have finalized a component, you would like to make sure this component, while testing, so you perform verification and validation of this component using Mill, Hill, and SIL. And then take it to a system level similar Mill, Hill, and SIL. Here, ideally, you do this using a physical prototypes. And what we have also been seeing, the hardware and the software team are isolated from one another. So if you're looking for the software validation also, let's say Mill, SIL, Hill kind of thing, you either go with a physical prototype or you go with a low fidelity model to validate your software. Similar thing happens on the hardware side also. Here also, either you go with a physical prototype or you go with the low fidelity models. So that's where ANSYS proposes, and it has a solution where instead of going with the low fidelity models, you can start using a high fidelity models. This high fidelity models are coming from your simulations. So you don't have to do an extra step. All you have to do is use the simulation for designing your components. And once the component design are done, you can export that high fidelity models. This can be either in the form of ROM or FMU or so on. And then that can be used in conjunction with your software for, the SIL or using it Mill, Hill kind of thing. So that's on the component level, but each of these FMUs or ROMs which are coming from the simulation can also be integrated into your system level simulations. And that's what you can see here for the powertrain Mill Hill Sill. What we are showing here is like you can use this high fidelity models for validating your system level things. And also for the vehicle level test, instead of doing a physical prototypes and doing your vehicle level test or road test, you can go ahead and also perform that virtually so that you can reduce the number of physical prototypes and the test which you perform. So let me go to the agenda for today. So today's agenda is battery subsystem validation, motor subsystem validation. And along with that, my colleague would also like to focus on AI and ML, where many times the simulation, instead of doing a lot of simulations, can be taken advantage of machine learning or AI and ML, and use in conjunction with simulation, so that you can reduce the number of simulations to be performed. You can accelerate your physical prototypes, and so on, and you can get a better insight. So that's one thing. The second thing is virtual vehicle drive validation. Here again, instead of doing, you may be having n number of drive cycles which you need to perform, different test scenarios to be performed. So instead of that, instead of doing a physical drive validation, can even this be done virtually? So this is something which we'll be seeing in next couple of slides. So let's get to our first topic, which is on the battery subsystem validation. Here, as I mentioned, this is something which we have been doing day in, day out kind of thing, where you perform a CAE analysis. You start with the electrolyte level analysis, a particle level analysis. You visualize how your lithium ion is going to be depleted. This is done by the the chemical engineers, and then taking it to the thermal and the structural reliability analysis by the thermal engineer, making sure the temperatures are within the limit, there's no thermal or mechanical abuse, and there's no fire. So, and if there is a fire, how you can mitigate that. Then taking it further to electrical engineer, making sure if it's in the system, there are no EMI/EMC issues, and finally making sure once your battery is being designed, it also needs an BMS, making sure if it keeps on monitoring your data like the temperature, the voltage, the current, and so on. And while it's measuring, it's also taking into account some algo, some logic. Let's say if the temperatures are high, increase the flow rate. If the its SOC is 0.9, reduce the charging, and so on. So all those logics, I would say, are going behind your BMS part. So this is something where Ansys is doing, and it helps. But the main objective of today's presentation is how we can take this CAE analysis for further validation. And this is one of the slides which I'm trying to highlight, where once you perform your CAE analysis, you can convert that into a high fidelity model, which I'm showing here, the step 3, which is reduced order model. And this is coming from your thermal models, as you can see the step 2. So this ROMs, what I normally call them, or the high fidelity models, they run very quickly. I would say this would be running in few seconds. Whereas compared to thermal models or CFD models, which takes a couple of hours for a given drive cycles. So you're converting your heavy 3D models to lightweighted ROMs, and it's as accurate as your CFD models because it's derived from them. And now, instead of using a low fidelity model for your BMS validation, you can use this high fidelity models there. And it's already available. And with this step, you're bridging the gap between a simulation engineer and a CAE engineer, or the hardware engineer. Now the software engineer can go back, he can fine tune his parameters, let's say the flow rate, or he can change the charging, discharging algorithms, and so on. Because now he has more confidence on his design compared to using a low fidelity models. Yeah. So it's not just with one scenarios, this are faster, so you can use this for multiple scenarios, validate your BMS. You can also share it with your end customers about this validation. And this is a standard practice, which is it's being started adopting at multiple OEMs. And yeah, just wanted to share about how you can come up with the high fidelity models and use it for BMS validations or your software validation moving down the line. So with this, I will hand it over to my colleague, Tushar Sambharan, and now we'll be talking more on the motor subsystem validation, AI, ML, vehicle drive validations, and so on. Yeah, Tushar.
Yeah, thank you, Ankit, for the details they provided, setting up the context and covering the battery part. Now, coming to the motor, again, so motor is a very important part of the overall electric drivetrain. It's basically the engine in the replacement, right? So you need to make sure whatever the motor subsystem that you design, it has to be efficient, not only in terms of performance, but efficient in terms of operation as well. And that's a very important in terms of validation, to make sure that whatever the requirement that you lay down for the motor performance and the overall operation, those are getting met. And that's what we'll talk about in the next few slides, is how the simulation helps to achieve those goals of the motor validation, both from the performance and the drivability. Now, if you typically look at the motor design workflow itself, motor is kind of a component whose whole life cycle, design life cycle, can be maintained in a virtual environment and with a very high confidence. And there are many practices in the industry you can see where people have put forward how the virtual validations or virtual design environment for the motors has been able to cut down their overall design cycle. So typically when you start by for designing a motor, you start by some specifications of your torque demand, speed demand, power demand, so on and so forth. And then you have some kind of a constraints like sizing constraint, current constraint, thermal constraint, so on and so forth. Now you take these requirements and your constraints and you start by putting together a design, and typically you start with a concept level design. You typically use something which is much more user friendly, which runs faster, and do a concept level sizing of the motor. So when you say concept level sizing, it could include the electromagnetic sizing, which includes basically coming up with the overall design of the motor, like slots and things like that. And then you also go to a thermal sizing where you decide what kind of cooling system you need, how that heat exchanger should look like, so on and so forth. And once you do the sizing, you validate that across the full torque speed envelope, because it's a traction motor. It's supposed to be operating across the envelope. And then you do a lot of optimization at this stage itself, because you are in the early stage of the design. You need to make sure everything is frozen and you don't leave too much for the later stage. That's what the front loading is in a sense, right? So you do a lot of optimization and make sure you come up with the right design in the initial stage. Once you have that right design, you push it to you do a concept design review probably, and then you push it to the detailed design stage where you do a much more detailed analysis, like what if scenario studies, the fault tolerance studies. Then you do a reliability studies like thermal reliability, structural reliability, or even NVH characterization. Now, once you do all these, you kind of freeze up on the components. And now many times what people do is they go directly to the prototype and testing. But there is a lot of things that you can do before that itself. For example, if you talk about the motor is not alone, right? It has to work with your power electronics. It has to work with the motor controller. So the question comes is, how do I make sure whatever motor I have designed, is it controllable? And how do I ensure whatever the controller I have designed, is it working correctly with the motor that I have designed? Because they both needs to meet together in a synchronous way, right? And that's where the virtual validation for the motor subsystem also comes into picture, where we talk about generating a high fidelity model from your simulation, from your FE data, which you are basically generating through your design process, and create a high fidelity representation of that motor model and push it for your motor controller validation. Now, typically right now, if you look at the industry, many of the people are still do validations using a more of a low fidelity abstract model with a constant parameters, which may be okay for an industrial motor, but if you look for an electric vehicle, the operation or envelope of operation is so huge that the characteristics of the motor significantly varies. So when you do a comparison of a controller working with the motor with constant parameter and compare it with the high fidelity model, you will see that there is significant deviation in terms of overall performance. And what you see is that the response time, the overshoots, the delay, those all parameters are significantly different compared to what you realize in the real life when you use a library based model. And that's pushes the need for having a high fidelity representation, so that whatever the controller you tune, it becomes it needs very little adjustment when it goes into the physical product. So you don't have to do too many iterations back and forth from the test bench to your lab to your design environment, and you kind of will be able to sign off with much less efforts. And just to prove the fidelity of the reduced order model that is generated for motor, on the right side you see the reduced order model results compared with the full transient FEA simulation itself, and they closely match. So that basically indicates the reduced order models are also of the same fidelity as FEA, which itself is proven to be very accurate. So these kind of reduced order models can be pushed into your simulation environment. Here we have shown the example using the MATLAB Simulink, but it could be any other simulation environment where you may be modeling or simulating the controls. So there is a lot of questions on the controller level as well. Now, coming to the AI and ML, I think this is something that is going to be a game changer going forward, because the techniques that are getting developed through machine learning are going to be come together with the simulation, of course, are going to be very powerful in making sure that whatever the real life situation that you can mimic, those can be brought into the virtual environment, because there are many variabilities in the real life compared to the virtual environment, and those real life situations can be captured through ML and can complement together with the simulation. I'm going to show you a couple of examples related to EV for use of AI ML techniques. First one is the torque speed characterization of the traction motor. Now, if you are a design engineer, you know, motor design engineer, you will know how critical is the torque speed characterization and how critical is to do it accurately. But when you do go for a very high fidelity simulation, something like 3D, it takes significantly long time because it's a huge design table that needs to be solved to characterize the motor. And to be able to solve such a huge design table, you need quite a big computational power in your simulation environment to be able to carry that out. But when you couple this with something called a fusion modeling, where you use a very low fidelity simulation and combine it with a very few high fidelity simulation data, and then if you use this machine learning techniques, what you can do is you can use a very small data from a 3D FEA simulation and very large data from something like an analytical solution, and combine them in an economic mix and achieve the results as accurate as 3D FEA. You can actually see the comparison that I have laid down, the 3D FEA simulations compared with the fusion model. They are quite close to the 3D FEA results. And overall process gives you a more than 10x speed up in one single iterations. Now, if you put together the number of iterations that the motor goes through, it could be a multiple fold times the speed up that you can achieve in terms of simulation. Now, another example is for the battery life prediction. Now, battery life prediction itself is a quite complex because there is a huge variability in terms of the way they are manufactured itself. A cell to cell available life could be different. On top of that, remaining useful life could change based on how you discharge or charge that particular cell, what kind of environment it goes through, what kind of temperature it sees. So the overall operation as well as the manufacturing itself can change the remaining useful life of the battery. So you need to implement something like a predictive model, which can take into the statistical considerations into the calculation and able to predict the remaining useful life of the battery, taking into account the overall variabilities as well as the change in the operating conditions. And we have implemented these kind of techniques which can work together with the simulation environment, and you should be able, not only the simulation environment, but this could actually work with the physical asset as well, where you can actually predict the remaining useful life of the battery using these techniques. Coming to the last section is the vehicle validation. We talked about the subsystem level validations, both for the battery, motor, but these all subsystems also needs to come together on a vehicle. And when you put it on a vehicle and you do a drive cycle, many times what you realize that the full system, when you do a drive test, it gives you a significantly different performance than what you expected, because the driving conditions are significantly different, right? The demand that you expected in your design phase may not be the same as you put it to in a real drive. So that those variabilities doesn't get accounted many times. On top of that, if you look at the vehicle performance, you hear many times the real when the customer takes a vehicle and he drives, the range is completely different than what is certified, because it is based on the certain conditions is certified. And many times you want to account for all these real life scenarios, and that's where the vehicle drive test becomes very important. So what we are trying to do here is in the vehicle drive test is basically combine our high fidelity models that we developed through simulation. You have done a CFD simulation for the battery, you have done a FEA simulation for the motor, and you probably have other components as well, which are brought through simulation or brought through some experimental results. And then you combine them together in a simulation, in 1D simulation environment, and create a plant model. That becomes the representation of your vehicle. And then you have to connect it with the environment, the surrounding, because the surrounding and plays a very important role in how the vehicle will perform in real life, right? So you need to get into the details of how the vehicle road profile will change, what kind of inclinations you will come across, how is the turning, what is the need of the braking that may come across. So these all scenarios needs to be taken into account together with the plant, so that you can be more confident about what kind of range you can expect from the vehicle, what kind of temperatures the battery may encounter, how the SOC is getting balanced. You can even bring in your BMS and validate whether the BMS functioning is getting done correctly or not. So there are a lot of scope to expand this and go beyond our traditional validations and go more closer to the real life conditions through these validation techniques. Just to highlight that, I'm going to play this video and hopefully it will be self-explanatory, and that probably will be the last slide from my presentation. So the goal is to estimate the range of the vehicle, and there are multiple steps in it. What we are trying to do is we are trying to create a scenario out of the real life map data. That scenario we can feed into a software and create a real environment which will be used for the driving. Similarly, the very high fidelity plant model of the vehicle has been put together. If you see, there is a detailed model of the battery, which basically includes the 2RC model, including the temperature dependent RC parameters. And we also have a reduced order model extracted from the CFD simulations, which capture the thermal behavior of the battery. Now, same applies for the motor as well. The motor reduced order model is also generated from motor FEA analysis, and that also has been put into the system environment. There is a connection to the vehicle model where the rest of the driveline components are getting modeled. And then we are defining some kind of a drive cycle here. The WLTC drive cycle for class 2 vehicles is getting defined. You could also do it with traffic. Right now we are doing just based on the drive cycle, but you could actually include real traffic conditions. And finally, we are doing a drive test onto the virtual environment. So as you can see, the vehicle will accelerate and decelerate based on the demand that is coming from the drive cycle. And based on that, the battery will provide the energy to the motor and it will get discharged. Of course, this is a long drive, so we are just showing it in a much fast forward method. So you are basically seeing a full drive cycle that is being conducted here. And over the full drive cycle, you are basically monitoring the SOC, the temperature, and the overall range of the vehicle. So that's all I had from my side. Thanks a lot for your time, and hope you have a nice day. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Khushwant Pawar. I head the cybersecurity department at ETAS Automotive India Private Limited. I represent Script in the sense. I am here at the Electric Two-Wheeler Summit to deliver a short presentation on safe and secure ride. A quick look at the agenda: digital transformation in the two-wheeler industry, safety and security at the core, where to start, and a short wrap-up. So, the connected electric two-wheelers are actually leading the digital transformation in the two-wheeler industry. As it is, we see that vehicles are connecting to the back end, and then a plethora of services are emerging, from secure software updates to vehicle diagnostics, maintenance that can be done remotely, fleet management, infotainment, multimodal mobility, smart accesses, advanced just like driver assistance systems, advanced rider assistance systems, and you name it. But all of this is rendering the systems far more complex. And now the digital transformation of these two-wheelers does not only include the back-end services which we saw in the previous slide. It also includes a lot of onboard features. A small word cloud that we did in few months ago. Some of the keywords that emerged were smart windshield, for example, ABS for below 125, especially in the Indian market, is becoming more and more relevant. Airbags from the passenger safety perspective, or augmented reality based helmets. Now that is quite a deal. So basic safety and more assistance for the drivers or the riders. But what's happening with this is there are challenges. There is far too much code that is going into those 4, 5, 6 ECUs of a two-wheeler, and that is increasing the complexity far beyond imagination and includes a inherent risk of failures, of safety glitches, of security glitches that can lead to fatal consequences. There is also an expectation that there will be an abrupt change in the development process because safety and security will not be addressed by the conventional product development methods. Also, scalability is an issue. So with more and more features and the affordability part that we face in the Indian market or globally also to a certain extent, there will be more variants coming up with mix and matches of these features. And the dependencies of these features on each other in those variants will lead to an issue with the scalability. Time constraints are always there. You have shorter and shorter development life cycles and more expectations from the development itself. And finally, there is no second chance. A safety or a security failure can lead to a situation which may lead to heavy financial consequences and also legal suits against the organizations. So let's take a look at safety and security at the core of the next gen two-wheelers. When we look at functional safety and cyber security, in a lot of discussions, in past 5 years at least, my interaction has been in both these areas very closely with industry leaders. There has been less appreciation of the fact that these are two separate disciplines. These are parallel disciplines. They have different thought process, the ideology is different, the objectives are different. Functional safety, in essence, is an inside-out view of any hazards or harms that can be caused. Whereas cybersecurity is an outside-in entry into the system and which needs to be protected. In all probabilities, remember that there is no safety without security, and vis-a-vis, there is no security without proper safety. In a sense, this is what the relationship between safety and security is. They are complementing each other, they are counterbalancing each other, they are ensuring that the other does not fail because of the prior. Fundamental difference between safety and security is the goal itself is to prevent the system from causing an unintended harm. So we've heard about cases like unintended acceleration of a system of one of the major OEM, four-wheeler OEMs. Imagine unintended deployment of a passenger safety feature like airbags for that matter. Totally unintended because of a software glitch. Or maybe hardware malfunction. The airbag does not deploy when needed, right? A software glitch leading to issues with the steering control in reverse park assist. These are some examples of an unintended harm that can be caused to people because of a safety issue. On the contrary, security is an outside-in entry into the system to cause harm with an intent to cause harm. So the goal of security would be to prevent people or miscreants, I must say, from causing intentional harm to the system, eventually to the people. A small graphic represents this very well. This is like system causing harm on the people, and this people intentionally blowing up the safety and security mechanisms of a vehicle. The objective of safety and security is to stop this, prevent this from happening. Where do you start? Obviously, if you want to implement safety and security, you would want to figure out, talk to the experts, or maybe look at some of the standards which are available. So there is this functional safety standard for ISO 26262 and automotive cybersecurity standard, which is an international standard state right now. It just needs to be ratified. So it is de facto standard as of now for cybersecurity. Ignore the text here because there is a lot of information in this. This is publicly available information also. But all you can see is that there are several commonalities. They start, there are several chapters. You have to do a lot of activities, set up an organization to deal with safety. Similarly, you need to set up an organization to deal with security for your products. And in the end, come up with a product which is safe as well as secure. We just thought of simplifying this to some extent. In a sense, the development life cycle is going to start at some point after the feature definition is done. Then an item or component definition analysis, then some concepts and measures would come up. The design will take place, and implementation, VNV release. This is a typical development cycle. Safety and security will start in essence at the beginning of the development itself. There is a threat and risk analysis that needs to be done from the security perspective, and safety will take its root of hazard and risk analysis. Then obviously security goals and safety goals along with their measures are defined, safety security concepts emerge, and this is now fed into the design, because this is where the actual hardware software design will then incorporate all of these concepts for safety and security, ensure that the implementation is correct, and then the validation phase for safety and security can be kicked in. Remember that security has an independent function and safety also is an independent function. They are parallels in a sense, and we have to ensure that both these parallels cross each other or have proper interlinkages along with the development cycle, development process, so that no essential steps or artifacts are missed out in the entire development. Plus, we need to ensure that they operate pretty much autonomously. Independence is needed. Only then an unbiased security concept and unbiased safety concept can be created and implemented. Not to forget that there are several post-production activities which will come up. So development of a secure product usually stops at the product release, SOP. Now, there will be post-SOP activities, a lot of them, especially in case of security, where incident response or key management or ensuring the safe and secure updates are supported well throughout the life cycle of the vehicle. So those activities are also considered when you're considering the security and safety topics. However, easy said than done. Safety and security have a lot of conflicts when actual implementation begins. As it is, the objectives are slightly different inside out and outside in views. So a good conflict example would be fault tolerance mechanisms from functional safety perspective. Usually would bring a system into a safe mode of operation in a certain circumstances. So these kind of mechanisms are triggered in a certain time interval. So if there is certain kind of behavior noticed within X milliseconds, the fault tolerant mechanism will be triggered, and then the device will be in a safe mode. Now, an attacker can, if a security is not very well implemented, an attacker can trigger this kind of operation, safe mode operation, which will thereby render a compromised safety integrity, right? So what would you do? You would implement security mechanisms like encryption or authentication especially, because you would want to ensure that no attacker input is considered by the rest of the system. So the systems gets input only from authentic sources like another function or another ECU for that matter. Now, these algorithms also take a lot of computational time. So much so that it can lead to a situation where the fault tolerant mechanism may not be triggered in the X milliseconds because of the computational conflict between the safety and security implementations. Now, these situations are case to case handled. Usually, there is no consensus on what takes precedence, like safety takes precedence or security takes precedence. How to handle these situations is totally dealt in the limits of hardware and software constraints, especially hardware computational constraints. So the expected behavior is a balance between safety and security. However, it is very easy said than done. There is a lot of intervention and maybe in future conversions of the concepts that needs to be done for safety and security. Next, I would want to talk about aligning a lot of new and existing disciplines to speed up. If your target is to reach a safe and secure ride, then you have already inbuilt quality processes, right? At least secure coding, coding quality guidelines would be followed. Just try to upgrade it to maybe secure coding guidelines as well. If you're already implementing advanced features or looking at AutoSAR for that matter, just try and see what all can be used to create the safety and security artifacts. Safety and security standards are already there. So aligning, seeing through all of them may lead to a faster or smarter path to the objective. And just to take an example on AutoSAR. Now, AutoSAR already has inbuilt mechanisms to address some security topics, especially mentioned in the WP29, which is a regulatory topic which has come up very recently in the Europe and Japan, Korea. So CryptoStack is already well defined. There is a secure SecOC, secure communication implementation guideline available. Secure logging diagnostics is already present. So the standard, AutoSAR standard, is actually giving a lot of intrusion detection for that matter are already inbuilt. They can be addressed with minimum effort on reinventing the wheel. So take this, try to leverage the existing technologies or existing standards and then implement. So that is a way of fast tracking the development of safe and secure ride. Where to start? Of course, Script has a huge set of consultancy services. We offer services from analysis of security assets, and then creating security concepts, creating security specifications, implementation specifications, penetration testing to ensure that the security is validated, well tested, and then help you in certifying, creating a cybersecurity case for the development. Not to forget, there are a lot of post-production activities that also need to be addressed. Not only services, Script also specializes in lot of products that are needed to kickstart your development. So we have crypto products, HSM, non-HSM, AUTOSAR, non-AUTOSAR, independent of underlying hardware, very low footprint. So, and safety compliant, so ASIL-D compliant crypto software. There is V2X stack, which is already available for use, and then also intrusion detection and CAN firewall or Ethernet firewalls are available. Then there is a huge set of managed services, because post-production you will have to consider the PKI management, right from credentials generations like digital certificates and signature generation to the entire life cycle of handling these digital certificates. So that's managed service. And vehicle operation, security operations center for security incident response, threat intelligence and forensics. So all of these activities can be handled in a managed services manner as far as the automotive cybersecurity is concerned, or two-wheeler cybersecurity is concerned. When we look at software engineering solutions, ETAS already has two very important building blocks of the functionally safe design topic. One is CODE, that gives you a completely deterministic behavior of a system. So the system design can ensure that there are no faults that can be introduced and no states are unanalyzed in the entire system. Similarly, there is ASCII, which delivers codes which are already functional safety compliant. On functional safety itself, we offer huge set of services for consultancy in terms of safety management, right from process gap analysis to aligning safety and security standard requirements, gap analysis, confirmation measures, training, coaching, hand-holding, creating safety risk analysis, and a safety concept development, especially for advanced topics like over-the-air updates. We have been promoting it for quite some time. Some of the supporting processes, like how to build confidence in some sort of software tools. Earlier, I mentioned that ASCII and SCODE are qualified tools, functional safety qualified tools. This kind of confidence can be built for your tool chain, whatever you might be using. And then system and software development services. Anything that is applicable, be it SOTIF, that is ISO past 1448, that is the safety of the intended functionality topic, or be it AUTOSAR in general, ISO 26262. We have been supporting a lot of customers. Last but not the least, there are onboard software that we already have that are safety compliant and ASIL-D certified also. So just like the software, say crypto software stacks, there is also AUTOSAR based software stack. There is AUTOSAR OS. There are flash bootloaders, non-AUTOSAR OS. All of this with a great amount of documentation and certifications available for safety compliance. Quick wrap up. So where would you ideally start? You would want to introspect. Is safe and secure ride your objective? So if your organization is gearing up for safe and secure ride, try to connect with internal stakeholders, identify the need of the organization. how much safety and security is needed for the intended functionality or the intended subsystem or the target of evaluation or entire vehicle for that matter. Align with subject matter experts to identify impact on yourself, your department. Of course, you can talk to experts. We at Script have been attempting to understand this complexity, but we can assure you that this is an ever increasing complexity. So it's a continuous learning process for us, working with multiple OEMs, helping them achieve safety and security compliance, supporting their tier ones in achieving the intended objective from the gaps to the target states. Then define your department's role. It could be anything, setting up an engineering process or aligning safety and security process, or creating a safety artifacts, safety concept, or validating security through penetration tests, or implementing a vehicle security operations center. Identify your department's role, then take the next step, because at the top in your organization there will be a lot of discussion that would be going on that probably you're not aware of. And as it is said, that different strokes for different folks. Safety and security are parallels. They need different competencies. They are complementing streams, occasionally conflicting also, but alignment in both these competencies is extremely crucial, because the failure of one can lead to failure of other. So wish you a great, safe and secure ride, and have a great event. That's about it from my side. Thank you very much.